Welcome to our deep dive into the history of Muslim rule in India. Today we'll explore the key events, figures and impacts of this significant period, a period that fundamentally reshaped the Indian subcontinent. Our story begins not in the halls of Delhi or the palaces of the Mughals, but centuries earlier on the shores of the Indus River, in a region known as Sindh. Fasten your seatbelts, folks, because we're about to journey back to the 8th century, a time when the armies of the Islamic Caliphate were pushing the boundaries of the known world, and a new chapter in Indian history was about to be written in blood and fire. Imagine, if you will, the world in the 7th century. The Roman Empire has long since crumbled in the West, but in the East, a new force is rising. The Islamic Caliphate. Fueled by a new faith, the Caliphate's armies have swept across North Africa. From Morocco to India, the green banner of Islam flies high. Damascus, the Caliphate's capital, hums with energy. It's a time of incredible dynamism, of expansion and conquest. As the 7th century gives way to the 8th, the eyes of the Caliphate turn east. But India is no pushover. It's a land of formidable kingdoms and battle-hardened warriors. For the Umayyad Caliphate, Sindh represents both a tempting prize and a formidable challenge. So, why Sindh? Why would the rulers of the Caliphate, sitting pretty in their opulent palaces in Damascus, risk their armies and their treasure on such a distant campaign? First and foremost, there's the economic imperative. The Indus River Valley is a breadbasket, a fertile land capable of generating enormous agricultural wealth. And let's not forget the legendary riches of India, the gold, the spices, the silks. The early caliphate was driven by a powerful religious zeal, a desire to spread Islam. Finally, there's the lure of political expansion. Conquering Sindh would expand their empire and enhance their prestige. Now, the Arab advance into Sindh wasn't some sudden, unforeseen event. It was a more gradual process, marked by initial raids and skirmishes as the two sides tested each other's strength. Think of it as a slow burn, tensions simmering before the whole thing finally erupts into full-blown war. The first Arab incursions into Sindh began in the mid-7th century, not long after the Prophet Muhammad's death. These were mostly hit-and-run raids, probes to test the defenses of the coastal regions. They weren't large-scale invasions, not yet, but they did result in the capture of booty and slaves, and perhaps more importantly, intelligence. These early raids gave the Arabs valuable information about the lay of the land, the strengths and weaknesses of their Indian adversaries. But they also had another unintended consequence. They served as a spark, igniting a slow-burning fuse that would eventually lead to all-out war. By the early 8th century, the stage was set for a major confrontation. The Caliphate, now under the rule of the ambitious Caliph al-Walid I, was at the zenith of its power. And in the Sindh region of India, a new ruler, Raja Dahir, had come to power. Enter Muhammad bin Qasim. A young man, barely out of his teens, Qasim was a brilliant military commander, a prodigy of war. And when the Caliph needed a leader to conquer Sindh, Qasim was his man. In 711 AD, Qasim, at the head of a well-equipped army, crossed the frontier into Sindh. This was no mere raid, this was a full-blown invasion intended to conquer and occupy. The fate of Sindh, and indeed the future course of Indian history, would be decided on a battlefield near the city of Auror in 712 AD. It was here that Qasim's forces, disciplined and battle-hardened, met the army of Raja Dahir. Dahir's forces, though larger in number, were a mix of different groups, each with their own loyalties and fighting styles. The Arabs, on the other hand, were a united force, bound by their faith and inspired by their young commander. The Battle of Auror was a bloody, hard-fought affair. Imagine the clash of steel, the cries of the wounded, the thunder of hooves as cavalry charged. But in the end, Qasim's superior tactics and the discipline of his troops won the day. Raja Dahir was killed, his army routed, the road to Sindh lay open. With Dahir defeated and his army scattered, Qasim pressed his advantage. City after city fell to the Arab invaders. Debal, a major port city, was captured and sacked. Nerun, with its famous Sun Temple, was captured after a brief siege. Auror, the site of Dahir's last stand, was occupied. Brahmanabad, one of the largest and most prosperous cities in Sindh, was captured after a lengthy siege. By 712 AD, just a year after crossing the frontier, Qasim was the undisputed master of Sindh. The speed and completeness of the Arab victory was stunning. In just a few short years, a region that had been a distant outpost of the Islamic world was now firmly under its control. But the conquest was just the beginning. Muhammad bin Qasim, the conqueror of Sindh, was no mere military adventurer. He was also a shrewd administrator, a man determined to consolidate his gains and lay the foundations for lasting Arab rule. And he knew that true conquest involved more than just military victories. It required winning over the hearts and minds of the conquered population. So what did Qasim do? He implemented a policy of religious tolerance, allowing Hindus and Buddhists to continue practicing their faiths. This was a shrewd move, designed to prevent unrest and rebellion. He allowed local rulers who submitted to Arab authority to retain some degree of autonomy. This too was a calculated risk, but one that paid off in terms of stability. Qasim also oversaw the introduction of Islamic law, the establishment of mosques, and the promotion of Arabic language and culture. These were all part of a deliberate policy of Islamization, of making Sindh a more integral part of the Islamic world. The Arab conquest of Sindh was a momentous event, a turning point in Indian history, but it wasn't all smooth sailing for the new rulers of Sindh. Their grip on power, while firm, was not unchallenged. From the outset, they faced resistance from local rulers who refused to submit to foreign domination. These weren't just isolated uprisings. We're talking about persistent, simmering rebellions that flared up in different parts of Sindh throughout the period of Arab rule. Adding to their woes, the Arabs also had to deal with internal conflicts, power struggles within their own ranks. Remember, this was a time of great upheaval and change in the Islamic world. The Umayyad Caliphate, which had seemed so invincible just a few decades earlier, was itself beginning to show signs of strain. By the middle of the 8th century, the Umayyad Caliphate, the driving force behind the conquest of Sindh, was in serious trouble. Revolts were breaking out across their vast empire. Internal divisions were tearing them apart, and in 750 AD they were swept from power by a new dynasty, the Abbasids. The Abbasids shifted the Caliphate's center of gravity eastward to Baghdad. Sindh, once a prized possession, was now a distant frontier province, increasingly isolated from the heart of the Islamic world. And as the power of the Arabs waned, a new force was emerging in the east, the Ghaznavids. Led by Mahmud of Ghazni, a ruthless and ambitious ruler, the Ghaznavids carved out a vast empire that stretched from Persia to northwest India. In the early 11th century, Mahmud of Ghazni launched a series of devastating raids into India. His target wasn't just plunder. Mahmud was a zealous Muslim, determined to spread his faith by the sword. Mahmud of Ghazni's campaigns, though brutal, had a profound impact on the course of Indian history. They paved the way for the establishment of Muslim rule in northern India. They led to the destruction of numerous Hindu temples, which were seen by Mahmud as symbols of idolatry. But they also had other, more subtle and perhaps more enduring consequences. They brought about a new wave of cultural exchange between the Islamic world and India. Scholars, artists and poets flocked to the Ghaznavid court, bringing with them new ideas and artistic styles. The Ghaznavid period also saw the rise of Indo-Persian literature, a unique blend of Persian and Indian literary traditions. This fusion of cultures would have a lasting impact on Indian art, architecture and literature. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of Muslim rule in India. We've seen how the Arab conquest of Sindh in the 8th century opened the door for centuries of Islamic influence on the Indian subcontinent. We've explored the key events, the major players, and the lasting impact of this pivotal period. From the conquest of Sindh to the rise of the Ghaznavids, we've witnessed a clash of civilizations, a melting pot of cultures, and the birth of new ideas and traditions. The story of Muslim rule in India is a complex and often contradictory one, a tapestry woven from threads of conquest and conversion, of cultural exchange and religious tolerance. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more historical deep dives.